Well, hello again and welcome to Ribby's Classic Cooking. Today I'm going to make French bread. Well, French bread a la my mom, who had no French blood in her whatsoever. So this is her recipe for French bread, and it does make 4 lovely big loaves of bread. And however, it won't probably taste or look like anything that might have come out of a French bakery in France. Okay? I'll tell you that right now. But it's good bread. And the cost per loaf is about 50 cents per loaf, roughly. I costed it out. So we'll get started. Now, first of all, here's 3 cups of lukewarm water. And that means you stick your fingers in it and it feels warm to the touch. You can test it on test it on your wrist. Because you don't want it to be too hot, that will kill your yeast. If you have boiling water here, or if you have cold water, your yeast will be very slow to grow. It likes nice warm conditions. So now, to add that, right now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar to that, which my sugar canister is nearly empty. I need to refill, but that's okay. There's 2 tablespoons here, and you don't have to be really super accurate, although I'm using a measuring spoon. 2 tablespoons of sugar. Oops, now I need to stir that up. Sorry, I didn't have the spoon for that. There was something I was missing. Now I'm just going to stir that around a little bit, dissolve that sugar in there, because I'm going to add my yeast to this, and I'm going to do what they call proofing. Now, when I grew up and went to junior high and my mom made bread every day, they never used the word proofing. I had no idea what that meant. But all that it means is follow the directions on the package of yeast. And this isn't bread yeast. This is just baking yeast. So it's not really bread machine yeast or any special. It's just bread yeast. It's okay. It's active dry yeast is what it is. Active dry yeast is what I use. Now there, my sugar is now dissolved. And now I'm going to take my active dry yeast and I'm going to add 4.5 teaspoons, which each teaspoon weighs about 5 milliliters. So that's 25, about 25 milliliters. No, less than about 22 if you want to get real super precise. 2, 3, 4.5. Well, I like to be generous with my yeast. So I've just measured my yeast into my lukewarm water. See, there it is floating on top of the pitcher. I'm going to kind of encourage that to drop down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that to one side and I'm going to leave it alone for 10 minutes. I'm going to set a timer on my stove. So I'm not going to do another thing to that for 10 minutes. Nothing. You don't poke it, you don't prod it, you don't anything. You just get it growing and you just leave it alone. So I'm just going to give that a little, just to encourage my yeast to go down into my sugar water, because I want that. And when I come back in 10 minutes, that will be bubbling and growing like crazy. And that's the first step of my bread. So I'll see you in 10 minutes when my yeast is all nicely grown. Hello out there. 10 minutes have gone by and I will show you what my yeast looks like. All bubbly and rising, and your yeast should look like that. This is a 3-cup glass measuring cup. So anyway, there you go. See how it's bubbled up here? That's about 750 milliliters of water. And there, I'm just going to dump that all into my big mixing bowl. This is a really huge one. This is bigger than the 8-liter 16-cup model. This is a step up. This is the mammoth one. It isn't even measured in here how big it is. It's just super big. Now I'm going to add the rest of my ingredients to my bread, and I'm just going to read this off to you here. 4.5 teaspoons of yeast, which is 2 packages or 23 milliliters. 3 cups of lukewarm water, 750 milliliters. 2 tablespoons of sugar, 30 milliliters. Now, I have 8 cups of all-purpose flour over here, and that weighs out to be 1,224 grams. if you can get hard durum wheat, Canadian wheat. 2 teaspoons of salt I'm going to be adding in here, which is 10 milliliters. And 2 tablespoons of shortening, which is 30 milliliters, which is here. 30 milliliters of shortening. Now, you mix your yeast and water and sugar, which I let stand for 10 minutes, okay? Now I stir in the other ingredients. I'm going to add a bunch of my flour, but I'm going to add these other ones too, because I want to make sure to well integrate my shortening and my salt to my flour, okay? So I may have to change spoons. This is a bit pathetic for this particular recipe. So I'm just going to add a bunch of flour in here. I've got 8 cups of flour measured out in this big bowl here. So I'm just going to start scooping it into here. And I usually scoop in about 4 cups of flour before I do anything at all. There you go. I'm going to get enough to absorb that water. There's a lot of water in there. And I'm going to add in my shortening because I want to get that integrated into my bread. See? Yeah, integrated in there. Get in there. And I'll add my salt while I'm at it because then I won't forget it. 2 teaspoons of salt. Here we go. 2 teaspoons of salt. 1, 2. There you go. Now those are all my ingredients for the bread. Now I'm just going to start stirring. And I'm just going to keep stirring till I stir in all the water and absorb the flour and get a nice dough going here. But you know what? I'm not going to knead this bread. I'm going to do something very strange to it, something I don't do to any other recipe of bread. That's why I want to make this one for you today, because it is quite unique. See, even after 4 cups of flour, see how soft that made that dough? If you add that in one at a time, you'd be going, is this ever going to be mixed? So that's why I start out with about 4 cups of flour. By the time you get down to the last few cups of flour, you're going to do the only work you're going to do for this recipe. That's about 5 or 6 cups because I didn't fill those right up. I'm just going to start. Yeah, it starts getting stiffer. And you want to mix this in really well. Because what I'm going to do to this bread dough is I'm going to take an hour, and every 10 minutes in that hour I'm going to punch this bread dough down. So what that means is you set your timer on your stove. And I usually make a little mark somewhere to say, okay, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, because you punch it down, for an hour. You're doing that for an hour. But that's what you're doing to it instead of kneading it. You're punching out the big bubbles and replacing them with nice little bubbles. So then I'm going to, cut this dough into 4 equal pieces, more or less, because I'm a housewife and really, my loaves never end up being exactly the same size. Sorry, I don't weigh it. You could weigh it on a kitchen scale and then you'd have 4 nice even loaves, but it's good enough for my family, right? So I just make 4 nice loaves. I put them on one of my big cookie sheets, and then I'll let it rise for an hour and a half. I cut some slashes in the top with a sharp knife. Then I'll cover it up with a clean tea towel and let it rise for an hour and a half. Then I bake it in a preheated 400 degree oven, 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 205 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. And then when that comes out of the oven, I take it off my baking tray. I let it cool. Now it's a greased baking tray, now mind you. And then I let it cool for 20 minutes before I cut it. Okay, so I'm going to proceed with mixing this flour up, and I'm going to go away again, and I'm going to come back when I have something to show you, which is my bread dough all mixed up, okay? So then I'll show you what it looks like, and I'll show it to you when I finish punching it 6 times for an hour, I'll show you what it looks like, okay? Because I'm not going to show you, but it's a great way to get your frustrations out. Could you really give it to that bread? All right. I'll be back. All right, well, I forgot how much work this actually is to do this, and after you get down to the point where the wooden spoon won't do you any good to integrate, you just have to take your fist and work this dough. See, I've got the last bits of my flour here, and I've just been working this around in my bowl. You just keep working this around with your fist, punching it into your dough to make sure your flour gets in there and it all gets absorbed. Everything in the bowl needs to go in here. So you just keep folding the bowl over and over like that, and just use your fist to punch it in, and it'll improve your dough and your right arm muscle. See how that dough is that flour is starting to mix into my dough here, and you just keep doing that for the last couple of cups. It's a bit of a struggle, but add it about a half a cup at a time, and just keep at it. Take a break, change arms, get somebody else to help you, whatever you need. But get that flour into that dough and get that dough all nice and smooth and integrated. You don't want streaks of flour through your dough. You just keep persisting. It takes a bit of time and effort, but when you're finished, it's worth it, okay? I swear, honest, it'll be worth it. But that's what makes better bread. And if you have any frustrations or anxieties about COVID-19, hey, just take it out all on your bread, and you know what? Your bread will be better bread for it. Bread is the one thing you can take out your frustrations about anything on, and bread responds. It makes better bread. So anyway, see how that is there's no longer a pile of flour in here in my bowl. It's all gone into my bread, okay? And I'm just about at the end of my energy. I see I just get this flour off my hand, see? And it just sucks it right into my bread dough. Okay? You don't think it's going to work, but it does work, okay? So you just kind of gather up all the flour that's inside your bowl and everything else, okay? So, and of course, if there's a little bit left, it doesn't matter, because as you're punching this down inside your bowl, it's going to pick up those bits of flour that are in there. So, but not more than, say, a quarter of a cup. You don't want a whole lot of loose flour in your bowl when you start rising it, okay? So I'm just about ready to start punching it down for 6 times for an hour, because that's just about got all of my flour mixed into it. So, okay, I'll be back after I've showed you that punching it down. See, when you punch it down, you take your dough and you just punch it like this all over, just to flatten it down like that, and then you cover it and set your timer for 10 minutes and come back and do it again, okay? So good luck with your bread. I hope it turns out for you. So I'll be back in a few minutes to show you number 5, punch down. I'm about to punch down my dough. See, that's what it looks like after 4 times, and this is 5, and there's 1 more left to do. And then you can see that the bread has risen and it responds to being punched down. And if you find any places where you see any gas bubbles that are going on the side, just kind of punch it around the sides. Just kind of punch the whole thing in a circle. And just kind of turn it over. There. That's what it looks like when I'm done. You want to make sure you get rid of any large gas bubbles. And if you find any places where there's any raw flour, just give it a little punch and get it integrated. Okay? I'll be back in 10 minutes with number 6 and show you what happens to finish off the bread. Okay? I'll be back. Okay, welcome back to Ribby's Creative Cooking one more time. This is the 6th time I'm going to punch down this dough. And after I punch it down the 6th time, I'm going to pan my bread. Now, I have to put a little bit more flour on my surface, i.e. my countertop here, so that I can form this into loaves. So, I'm just going to move my bowl forward here. You can see what it looks like now that I punched it all down. It's quite grown, quite a bit more dough here than there was when I started out. And that's going to make 4 loaves of French bread. What I'm calling French bread. Probably no Frenchman would call it French bread, I'm afraid. But anyway, There we go. I'm just going to put a little flour down here and spread that out a bit with my hand. And I'm just going to dump this out on it, and then I'm going to move my camera so that you can see what I'm doing here to it. There we go. Okay. And that. Okay, and here's my bread dough right here. I'm just going to put some flour on both sides. I've just put enough flour down here on my board to be able to get both sides of my dough. Yeah, where's my knife? Okay, what did I do with my knife? Ah, I hit it on myself behind my pan. There we go. Got my little paring knife here. I'm just going to roughly cut this in half. I'm never very precise with making my bread, my loaves of bread exactly the same size. I could get out a kitchen, I could get out my kitchen scale and measure these more precisely, but I find this works for my family. And I have, old habits die hard. So I'm just going to cut this into 4 fairly equal sized pieces. And I'm just going to form this into a long, thin loaf. I'm just going to kind of squeeze this. I'm not doing any kneading to this bread. I've already punched it down 6 times, and I have already done all the kneading, all the integrating of the flour, as you can see from where I've cut the edges. There's no streaks of raw flour through there, and there's relatively few big bubbles. I don't want there to be big bubble holes in there. I want them to be all nice and even. So when my bread bakes, I won't have any big gaping holes in it. It'll be a nice fine texture. I'm just going to kind of roll this roughly into a log. I'm going to put that on my cookie sheet over here. Let's see that? And I'm going to make 4 like that, and I'm going to put them all on there. So I'm just going to roll this around. I'm just going to punch these down, roll them, try and make them all about the same thickness. And I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to slash some cuts in the top of that bread to give it that French bread look. And they're going to be like rough artisan loaves of bread. There. This was people's idea of foreign cooking back in the 70s, you see. So here we go. This is the second loaf on. And let's bring that over here a bit. And then after I've got these 4 loaves done on the sheet, and I have the slashes cut in them, then I'm going to cover them up with a clean tea towel. And I'm going to put them on top of my stove, and I'm going to leave them there for an hour and a half to double in bulk, to rise. So when they're ready to go in the oven, I'm going to preheat my oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 205 degrees Celsius. And I'm going to put these loaves in to bake for a half an hour, 30 minutes. There we go. Just to make that nice long, nice little loaf here. Pop that one on there. What's that? And it's my 4th loaf coming up here. See, my bread is here on my tray here. Oops. I don't want to get it into my flour here. Oh, I gotta tilt that up. When I get the 4th one on here, I'll give that a tilt up so you can see what they look like on here. I greased my pan previously. Oh, they won't stick to my pan. This is my large sheet pan. This one is bigger than a jelly roll pan. This one is, let's see, 17.25 by 11.5 by 1 inches. And, oh, the centimeters are on the other end. Let's see. 43.8 by 29.2 by 2.54 centimeters. So, that's larger than I would use for jelly roll. But it's a large baking sheet. The other one is more of a medium size. And see, I make sure that my seam is kind of covered. See? There we go. Nice log. And there's my 4 loaves of bread laid out on my pan. And now I'm going to take my paring knife and I'm just going to cut slashes on that like that, about 1/2 inch deep. And I'm just going to cut about 4 slashes across the top of each one. I do that now before I rise the bread, let the bread rise. There we go. Okay, there we go. See, all slashed. So it looks kind of like French bread, sort of. All right, now I'm going to leave you for 1.5 hours and let this bread rise. Just going to cover it up with my clean tea towel here. And I'm just going to put that on my stovetop. Well, unheated, cold stovetop. And leave that for 1.5 hours. And when it's ready to go in the oven, I'll show you what it looks like before it goes in the oven. And of course, when it comes out. All right. Well, here we are back again. And I've cut my head off again, so here I am. I'm going to bring the bread over and show you it. Right now the oven's starting to heat up, so I'm just going to show you my fully risen bread. There we go. The big reveal. Ta-da! There you go. You can see how that bread has risen and filled my whole pan here. So now, as soon as my oven beeps, I will be going in my oven for 30 minutes and I will have beautiful golden brown loaves of French bread. Mom's French bread. Anyway, I hope you're going to try this recipe out. I'll show it to you when it's all done. And I hope you're going to try this recipe. Oops. Let me just tip the camera up here a bit. There we go. Okay. I hope you're going to try this recipe. Let me know how it turns out for you. I know it's a lot of, there's a fair bit of muscle required to get the last cup or so of flour mixed into this stuff, but it's a good exercise for you. And you can also share this work with other people who are around your kitchen. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Anyway, I hope you'll like this particular show and this particular video post. And I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, because this isn't the only kind of bread I'm going to be making. I'm going to be making some 3-hour brown bread. And I also am planning to speak to all those people out there who have those bread machines that are sitting around in a dusty corner, because you can make fantastic bread dough with that roll and there's no labor involved for you. It's all on the machine to do all that stuff. So anyway, it's a good way to get homemade rolls, cinnamon buns if you happen to like cinnamon buns, and other goodies, pizza dough, things like that, for very inexpensively and really, really good. Anyway, I will be coming back to you again once this bread is all baked. Bye for now. All right, here we are back once more, and the timer is dinging. The bread is ready to come out of the oven. Ah, look at that. Golden brown, crusty deliciousness. There we go. Right off the pan, right onto the cooling rack. Yep. Beautifully browned, golden brown deliciousness. I'm just going to separate out these loaves so they have a chance to cool better. There. That's like separate them out. Now if you cook them further apart or on two cookie sheets, you'd have separate loaves. They'd all have outer crust like this on both sides, but I don't mind if the inside has an unfinished crust like this. I don't mind that two of my loaves look like this. You have the golden brown bottom and the sides, and my cuts are all there. Hear how that sounds? Let's flip this over. That is done. That is cooked bread. There you go. Now, this is going to have to sit for 20 minutes before it can be sliced, because if you don't, it's still soft in the middle And if you cut it now, it would all squish up just from the pressure of cutting it. And once it's cooled off, then it will hold its shape when you go to cut it. And you can make beautiful slices for artisan sandwiches or all kinds of things. Like I said, under 50 cents a loaf. Now, what do you think? Was that worth the effort to make that for 50 cents a loaf? 4 beautiful loaves of bread? I do. Personally, I do. Anyway, there's the recipe which I've been showing you, and I hope you've been able to see it and read it. And now I'm finished, so I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I hope you try this recipe for French bread. I hope you enjoyed watching Ruby's Classic Cooking today, and I hope you will subscribe and like my channel, and that you will try this recipe and comment below how it turned out for you. And I hope it goes well when you try it. Anyway, bye for now.